आज।
My name is Martha, and I'm 28 years old. For as long as I can remember, my family has treated me like the disappointment. While my sister Diane was the golden child with straight A's and a full scholarship to medical school, I was just the older sister who couldn't quite measure up. They'd made it crystal clear at every family dinner, every holiday gathering, every milestone celebration. But what happened at Diane's graduation ceremony 3 weeks ago changed everything between us forever. Before I tell you exactly what went down in that fancy hotel dining room, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about family drama and unexpected victories. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one, because what I announced that day left everyone absolutely speechless. Growing up in our middle-class household in Denver, Colorado, the expectations were always sky high. My father worked as a mechanical engineer for a local aerospace company, pulling in around $75,000 a year. My mother taught fourth grade at the neighborhood elementary school, bringing home another $42,000 annually. Together, they'd built what most people would consider a comfortable life in our three-bedroom ranch house in the suburbs. But comfortable wasn't enough when it came to their daughters' futures. From the moment Diane could walk, she was destined for greatness. Straight A's weren't just expected, they were demanded. When she made captain of the debate team in high school, our parents threw a celebration dinner. When she scored a 1,500 on her SATs, they framed the score report and hung it in the living room. When she received a full academic scholarship to the University of Colorado Boulder for pre-med, they called every relative within a 50-mile radius to share the news. My journey, however, took a different path. After graduating high school with a respectable but not exceptional 3.2 GPA, I didn't get into my dream school. Instead, I spent 2 years at the local community college working part-time at a coffee shop to help pay for classes before transferring to the University of Colorado, Denver, to finish my marketing degree. While Diane was dissecting cadavers and memorizing medical terminology, I was learning about consumer behavior and digital advertising strategies. By the time I turned 28, I'd landed a position as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech company downtown. The salary wasn't impressive at $45,000 a year, but it was steady work in a field I genuinely enjoyed. I'd found a decent one-bedroom apartment in downtown Denver for $1,200 a month, close enough to walk to work on nice days. Every Sunday, our family gathered for dinner at my parents' house. These weren't casual get-togethers. They were formal affairs where my mother set out her good china, and my father carved whatever roast he'd spent the afternoon preparing. Without fail, these dinners became showcases for Diane's latest achievements and subtle reminders of my perceived shortcomings. 3 weeks before Diane's graduation ceremony, we'd gathered for one of these typical Sunday dinners. Diane had just received news about her acceptance to the University of Colorado School of Medicine, and the conversation naturally centered around her bright future. As we passed around the mashed potatoes and green beans, my parents peppered her with questions about her specialty interests and residency plans. When there was finally a lull in the medical school discussion, I mentioned that I'd been promoted to senior coordinator at work, which came with a modest salary increase to $48,000. My mother looked up from her plate, briefly offered a polite, "That's nice, dear," and immediately turned back to ask Diane about her housing plans for medical school. That's when my father delivered the comment that would echo in my mind for weeks to come. He set down his fork, looked directly at me, and said, "Martha, you're almost 30 and still renting that little apartment. At this rate, Diane will probably own a house before you do." My mother nodded in agreement, adding with a slight chuckle, "Some people are just meant to rent forever, I suppose." The words stung more than I cared to admit. Here I was, working full-time, paying my own bills and building a career, yet somehow I was still seen as the family failure. Diane smiled sympathetically across the table, but she didn't defend me. Nobody did. As Diane's graduations approached, the family excitement reached fever pitch. My parents had booked a private dining room at the Brown Palace Hotel, Denver's most prestigious luxury establishment, for the celebration dinner. The cost was steep at $2,000 for a party of 20, including extended family and several of Diane's medical school friends who were flying in from out of state. Despite my modest income, I volunteered to contribute $400 toward the dinner. It represented nearly a third of my monthly rent, but I wanted to support my sister's achievement. What I didn't realize was how that contribution would be discussed behind my back. 2 weeks before the graduation ceremony, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off some photos Diane had requested for her graduation slideshow. As I approached the front door, I could hear my mother's voice through the screen door talking on the phone with my grandmother. "We didn't really want Martha there," she was saying in a hushed tone. "But we can't uninvite her now. She's paying for part of it anyway, so I suppose we have to include her. I just hope she doesn't embarrass us in front of Diane's friends from medical school." I stood frozen on the front porch, keys in hand, listening to my own mother discuss me like I was an unwanted obligation. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with my mother expressing concerns about my attitude and wondering if I might make a scene because I wasn't getting enough attention. That evening I went home and cried harder than I had in years. But the discovery that truly broke my heart came the following week, when I noticed Diane using her phone differently around me. She'd always been open about texting during our conversations, but suddenly she was hiding her screen and quickly switching apps when I approached. My curiosity got the better of me. During a family barbecue at my uncle's house, I noticed Diane had left her phone on the picnic table while she went inside to get more drinks. The screen lit up with a group message notification from something called Diane's Big Day. I recognized the phone numbers as my parents', my aunt, my uncle, and my grandmother. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The message thread was full of planning details for the graduation celebration, but what caught my attention were the comments about me. My mother had written, "Finally, one of our daughters made us proud." My father had responded, "Let's just hope Martha doesn't embarrass us in front of the medical school crowd." The betrayal cut deeper than anything my family had ever said to my face. They'd created an entire group chat to plan my sister's celebration while actively excluding me and talking about me like I was a problem to be managed. But the final revelation came during a conversation with my Uncle Richard, who worked as a real estate agent. During a casual family gathering, he mentioned how smart my parents had been to start Diane's college fund when she was born. $80,000 by the time she graduated high school, he said admiringly. That's some serious planning ahead. I felt my stomach drop. I'd never heard about any college fund for Diane, and I certainly hadn't had one for myself. When I asked my parents about it later that evening, my father shrugged and said, "We thought you'd figure it out yourself. You seemed more independent." The hypocrisy was stunning. Diane had been given every advantage, every opportunity, every dollar of support, while I'd been expected to figure it out myself. Yet somehow I was still seen as the disappointment. The breaking point came during our final family dinner before Diane's graduation. She'd just received confirmation that she'd been accepted to the University of Colorado School of Medicine with a partial scholarship, meaning she'd only need to take out loans for about $30,000 per year instead of the full $60,000 annual cost. As the family celebrated this news with champagne and congratulations, I tried to share some positive news of my own. I'd been selected to lead a major marketing campaign at work, which would likely result in another promotion and salary increase within the next 6 months. My mother looked at me with barely concealed impatience and said, "That's nice, dear," before immediately turning back to discuss Diane's medical school housing options. The dismissal was so complete, so effortless, that I felt like I'd been erased from the conversation entirely. That night I made a decision that would change everything. What my family didn't know was that for the past 18 months, I'd been living a completely different life than they imagined. While they saw me as the struggling renter who couldn't get her act together, I'd been quietly and methodically working toward a goal that none of them thought I was capable of achieving. It started with a side hustle I developed in freelance social media consulting. Using the skills I'd learned in my marketing degree and refined in my day job, I began taking on small businesses as clients during evenings and weekends. What began as a way to earn an extra $200 a month had grown into a thriving part-time business, bringing in between $800 and $1,200 monthly. Every single dollar of that extra income went straight into a high-yield savings account I'd opened specifically for one purpose: buying a house. I'd calculated that I needed at least $35,000 for a down payment on a home in the Denver metro area, plus additional funds for closing costs and moving expenses. To reach my goal faster, I'd cut my living expenses to the bone. I meal prepped every Sunday, making large batches of rice, beans, and vegetables that would last me through the week. I canceled my gym membership and started running in the park instead. I stopped buying new clothes unless absolutely necessary and shopped exclusively at thrift stores and discount retailers. I declined invitations to dinners out, concerts, and weekend trips that would drain my savings account. The house hunting process began 8 months ago. I'd pre-qualified for a mortgage with a local credit union, learning that my excellent payment history on student loans and credit cards had given me a credit score of 740. With my combined income from my day job and freelance work, I qualified for a loan up to $300,000. Over the next 8 months, I viewed 47 different properties. I lost out on 3 houses due to bidding wars with cash buyers. I had 2 mortgage applications fall through when sellers chose higher offers. Each rejection was devastating, but I refused to give up. Then 3 weeks ago, I found it. A 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom ranch house in Lakewood, a suburb about 20 minutes west of downtown Denver. The house was listed at $285,000, but the sellers were motivated to close quickly because they were relocating for work. I submitted an offer for $280,000 with a 20% down payment and a promise to close within 3 weeks. My real estate agent warned me that the timeline was aggressive, but I'd already arranged for expedited processing with my lender. 2 days later, my offer was accepted. The closing process was a whirlwind of paperwork, inspections, and final approvals. I had to take personal time off work to handle the various appointments, telling my boss I was dealing with a family matter, which in a way I was. On Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week before Diane's graduation ceremony, I sat in a conference room at the title company and signed what felt like hundreds of documents. The final paper I signed was the deed transfer, making me the official owner of a 3-bedroom house with a 2-car garage, a fenced backyard, and a perfect home office space for my growing freelance business. Walking out of that building with the keys in my hand was one of the most surreal moments of my life. At 28 years old, while my family still saw me as the daughter who would rent forever, I'd just become a homeowner. But I wasn't ready to tell them yet. I had something much bigger in mind. The week leading up to Diane's graduation was a masterclass in keeping secrets. I'd completed the closing on my house but hadn't moved in yet. My apartment lease didn't end for another month, so I had time to plan my transition carefully. More importantly, I had time to plan my announcement. Every day that week, I'd drive to my new house after work, using my key to let myself into what was legally my property. I'd walk through the rooms, imagining where I'd place furniture and how I'd set up my home office. The master bedroom had excellent natural light for video calls with freelance clients. The kitchen was twice the size of my apartment kitchen, with a breakfast nook that would be perfect for working on weekend projects. But with each visit to my new house, I felt the weight of my family's expectations and dismissals growing heavier. I thought about every Sunday dinner where my accomplishments were brushed aside, every conversation where I was compared unfavorably to Diane, every comment about my supposed inability to achieve anything meaningful. The day before Diane's graduation, our extended family began arriving in Denver. My aunt and uncle drove in from Colorado Springs. My grandmother flew in from Phoenix. Several of Diane's medical school friends arrived from various cities, planning to stay through the weekend for the celebration. That Friday evening, we had a family gathering at my parents' house to welcome everyone and do final preparations for Saturday's events. The house was buzzing with excitement and congratulations for Diane. Her medical school friends were impressive young women who spoke confidently about their residency plans and career goals. As I helped my mother arrange flowers and set up extra chairs, I overheard one of Diane's friends asking about me. "What does your sister do?" she asked Diane. The response made my stomach clench. "Oh, Martha works in marketing. She's still figuring things out." Still figuring things out. At 28, with a stable career, a growing business, and a house I just purchased with my own money, I was still seen as someone who hadn't figured out her life. That night, I went home to my apartment and made final preparations for what I had planned. I printed out photos of my new house that I'd taken earlier that week. I made sure the keys were easily accessible in my purse. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would time it, and how I would handle the inevitable reactions. The graduation ceremony itself was beautiful. Held at the University of Colorado Boulder's main campus, it was a formal affair with hundreds of graduates and their families. Diane looked radiant in her cap and gown, walking across the stage to receive her diploma magna cum laude. Despite everything that had happened between our family and me, I felt genuinely proud of her accomplishment. After the ceremony, we had a few hours before the dinner celebration. The family spent time taking photos on campus and congratulating Diane. Her medical school friends joined us for some of the photos, and I found myself pushed to the edges of most group shots. By 5 o'clock, we were making our way to the Brown Palace Hotel for the main event. The private dining room my parents had reserved was elegant with crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and fresh flower centerpieces. 20 people were seated around a large rectangular table, with Diane positioned at the head as the guest of honor. As the appetizer course was served, I felt my heart racing. The house keys in my purse seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. I'd planned to wait until after the main course during dessert, when everyone would be relaxed and the conversation would naturally turn to toasts and speeches. But as I sat there listening to my family and Diane's friends discuss her bright future in medicine, I felt the familiar sting of being overlooked and underestimated. Several people at the table asked me polite questions about my work, but their tone suggested they were just being courteous, before returning to more interesting conversations about medical school and residency programs. My hand found the keys in my purse, and I realized there would never be a perfect moment. There would only be the moment I chose to create. Geese. The moment came right after Diane finished her thank you speech to the assembled group. She'd stood gracefully, wine glass in hand, and delivered a heartfelt appreciation for everyone's support throughout her academic journey. She thanked our parents for their unwavering belief in her abilities, our extended family for their encouragement, and her medical school friends for their friendship and collaboration. As the applause died down and Diane settled back into her chair, I felt every eye in the room still focused on that end of the table. The energy was warm and celebratory, exactly the kind of atmosphere where people were primed to hear good news and share in someone's joy. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping slightly against the hardwood floor. The sound drew attention, and conversations around the table began to quiet as people noticed me rising to speak. "I'd like to say something too," I announced, my voice steadier than I'd expected it to be. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My parents looked slightly surprised but not alarmed. Diane smiled encouragingly, probably expecting me to add my own congratulations to the evening's speeches. Her medical school friends politely shifted their attention in my direction. "First, congratulations to Diane on this incredible achievement," I began, nodding toward my sister. "Getting into medical school is no small feat, and I'm genuinely proud of everything you've accomplished." There were murmurs of agreement around the table. So far, this seemed like a standard sister-to-sister congratulations, exactly what everyone expected to hear. "But I'm also celebrating something today." I continued, reaching into my purse. "This week I closed on my first house." I pulled out the keys and held them up, the metal catching the light from the chandelier above. The distinctive house key and garage door remote were clearly visible in my raised hand. The reaction was immediate and electric. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. My Uncle Richard, who worked in real estate, leaned forward with sudden interest. Several of Diane's medical school friends turned in their chairs to get a better look at me. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms in Lakewood. I continued, my confidence growing with each word. $280,000. I put down 20% in cash. My mother's face had gone completely white. She set down her wine glass with a shaky hand and whispered, "How is this possible?" My father's reaction was even more dramatic. His eyes narrowed as he demanded, "Where did you get that kind of money? What aren't you telling us?" But the energy in the room had shifted in a way I hadn't entirely anticipated. Diane's medical school friends were suddenly looking at me with genuine interest and respect. Sarah, whom I'd met earlier that day, actually gasped and said, "Wait, you bought a house in this market? That's incredible." I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery where I'd saved pictures of my new home. "The best part is that my mortgage payment will actually be less than most people pay in rent around here," I said, passing the phone to the person next to me so the images could make their way around the table. The photos showed a charming ranch-style house with a well-maintained front yard, a two-car garage, and beautiful mountain views from the back deck. As the phone passed from person to person, I could hear quiet exclamations of admiration and surprise. "Martha, this is amazing," said Jennifer, another of Diane's friends. "Buying a house at 28 in the Denver market is no joke. How did you manage it?" This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the opportunity to share the full story that my family had never bothered to ask about. Funny thing about being underestimated, I said, my eyes moving deliberately around the table to meet the gaze of each family member. "It gives you incredible motivation. While everyone assumed I'd rent forever, I was saving every penny, working side jobs, and building my credit score." I could see my parents exchanging glances, their expressions a mixture of shock and something that might have been embarrassment. They were clearly scrambling to process this information and figure out how to respond. "I've been running a freelance consulting business for the past 18 months, I continued. Social media marketing for small businesses. Started as a side hustle, bringing in an extra few $100s a month, but it's grown into something that brings in over $1,000 most months." The business revelations seemed to surprise people even more than the house purchase. My grandmother, who had been silent throughout my announcement, finally spoke up. "You have your own business, honey." "I do, Grandma. And with the home office space in my new house, I'm planning to expand it even further. Maybe even transition to full-time consulting in the next year or two." Around the table, the conversation had completely shifted. Instead of discussing Diane's medical school plans, people were asking me questions about real estate mortgage rates and entrepreneurship. Several of Diane's friends wanted to know about my consulting services, and my Uncle Richard was asking detailed questions about the house's location and market value. For the first time in my adult life, I was the center of positive attention at a family gathering, and it felt absolutely incredible. As the dinner continued and the initial shock of my announcement began to settle, the dynamics at the table shifted in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. My parents, clearly rattled by the revelation that their underachieving daughter had not only bought a house, but was also running a successful business, attempted to regain control of the narrative. "Well," my father said, clearing his throat loudly to recapture the room's attention, "we always taught both our daughters the importance of good financial habits. I'm glad to see those lessons finally paid off." The comment landed with a thud. Several people at the table, including my grandmother and Uncle Richard, turned to look at him with expressions that ranged from confusion to mild disapproval. The attempt to take credit for my success was so transparent that it was almost embarrassing to witness. I felt a surge of anger at his words, but I kept my voice calm and steady as I responded. "Actually, Dad, the most important lesson you taught me was that I had to do everything myself. And I'm grateful for that lesson, even if it wasn't intentional." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Diane stared down at her plate, clearly uncomfortable with the tension that had suddenly filled the room. But then something unexpected happened. My grandmother, who had been quietly observing the entire exchange, spoke up in her clear, authoritative voice that had commanded respect in our family for decades. "Martha," she said, "I'm proud of you. Buying a house on your own at your age shows real character and determination." She turned to look directly at my parents. Some lessons are learned best through experience, not lectures. The validation from my grandmother seemed to give other family members permission to express their genuine reactions. My Aunt Linda raised her wine glass and said, "To Martha for proving that quiet determination beats loud predictions every time." Several people around the table raised their glasses in response. Even some of Diane's medical school friends joined the impromptu toast, which made the moment feel even more surreal and wonderful. But the biggest surprise came from Diane herself. As the dinner was winding down and people were starting to gather their coats and purses, she approached me quietly. "Can we talk for a minute?" she asked, gesturing toward a quieter corner of the dining room. I followed her away from the group, uncertain about what she wanted to discuss. I worried that she might be upset about the attention shifting away from her graduation celebration. Instead, she surprised me completely. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I knew about the group chat. I should have said something, but I didn't want to rock the boat with Mom and Dad. That was wrong of me." The acknowledgement meant more to me than I'd expected. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It really hurt to feel so excluded." "And I had no idea about the college fund thing," she continued. "I just assumed you'd had the same advantages I did. If I'd known they hadn't saved anything for your education, I would have said something." For the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to my sister instead of my parents' favorite child. The conversation gave me hope that our relationship could be repaired and strengthened. As we rejoined the group, I noticed that several people were taking pictures with me in front of my house photos, which were still being passed around on my phone. The shift in how I was being perceived and treated was so dramatic that it felt like I was living in an alternate reality. When we finally left the restaurant, my parents asked to speak with me privately in the hotel parking lot. I could tell from their expressions that they weren't happy about how the evening had unfolded. "You could have told us about this," my mother said, her voice tight with emotion. "We're your family. We should have known about such a big decision." "Like you told me about Diane's college fund," I responded. "Or like you included me in the planning for tonight's dinner. Family communication seems to be selective in our household." My father's face reddened. "That's not fair, Martha. We've always supported you." "No," I said firmly. "You've always supported Diane. You've tolerated me. There's a difference, and tonight proved that difference doesn't matter anymore." The conversation was emotionally draining, but it was also liberating. For the first time in my adult life, I was speaking to my parents as an equal rather than as a disappointment seeking their approval. Over the following weeks, the ripple effects of that dinner continued to spread. Several of Diane's medical school friends reached out to me on social media, congratulating me on the house purchase and asking about my consulting services. Two of them actually became clients needing help with social media strategies for side businesses they were starting. My announcement had also caught the attention of my boss at my day job. When he learned about my successful house purchase and growing business, he was impressed by my financial responsibility and entrepreneurial spirit. Within 2 weeks, he offered me a promotion to senior marketing coordinator with a salary increase to $55,000 per year. The promotion wasn't just about money. It was validation that my professional skills were valued and recognized. Combined with my growing freelance business and my new status as a homeowner, I felt like my entire life trajectory had shifted in a positive direction. Akaya. Moving into my new house was a process that stretched over several weeks, but every box I unpacked and every piece of furniture I arranged felt like a small victory. The master bedroom became my sanctuary, with large windows that let in the morning sun and enough space for a reading nook where I could unwind after long days. The kitchen, twice the size of my apartment kitchen, became the heart of the home where I meal prepped and experimented with new recipes. But the room that brought me the most joy was the home office. With its built-in shelves, excellent natural lighting, and quiet atmosphere, it was the perfect space for expanding my freelance consulting business. I invested in a proper desk, ergonomic chair, and professional lighting setup for video calls with clients. Within a month of moving in, I was booking more clients than ever before, and seriously considering the possibility of going fully independent within the next year. The financial aspects of homeownership turned out to be even better than I'd anticipated. My mortgage payment, including property taxes and insurance, came to $1,850 per month. Compared to my previous rent of $1,200, the increase was manageable, especially with my promotion and growing business income. More importantly, I was building equity instead of paying someone else's mortgage. As the months passed, my relationship with my family began to evolve in unexpected ways. My parents, initially defensive about my success, gradually began to treat me with a new level of respect. They started asking for my advice on financial matters and even requested help with social media marketing for my mother's tutoring business. The most significant change was in my relationship with Diane. Without the constant comparison and competition that had defined our interactions, we discovered that we actually enjoyed each other's company. She became a regular visitor to my new house, often studying for medical school exams at my kitchen table, while I worked on client projects in my office. During one of these study sessions, she brought up something that had been weighing on her mind. "I've been thinking about what happened at the graduation dinner," she said during a break from her anatomy textbook. "I realized I never really knew you at all. I knew the version of you that existed in family conversations, but I didn't know about your business or your savings plan, or any of the things that actually matter to you." Her observation was both insightful and sad. We'd lived in the same house for 18 years, but had been strangers to each other's real lives and aspirations. "I think that's partly because I stopped sharing things with the family," I admitted. "After years of having my goals dismissed or minimized, I learned to keep my plans to myself." "That makes sense," she said. "But it also means I missed out on having a relationship with my actual sister instead of the family scapegoat version." The conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. From that day forward, we began meeting for coffee every few weeks, sharing updates about our respective careers and goals. I learned about her genuine passion for pediatric medicine and her concerns about the competitive nature of residency applications. She learned about my plans for business expansion and my growing confidence in my professional abilities. By Christmas, 6 months after the graduation dinner, I had the privilege of hosting the family holiday celebration in my new home. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The daughter who was supposed to rent forever was now welcoming the family into her own 3-bedroom house, complete with a Christmas tree in the living room and a dining table large enough to seat everyone comfortably. My parents arrived with a bottle of expensive wine and genuine compliments about my decorating choices. My grandmother spent the afternoon in my kitchen, teaching me her famous dinner roll recipe and expressing pride in my accomplishments. Even my extended family members seemed to see me differently, asking thoughtful questions about my business and treating me as a successful adult rather than the family's underachiever. During dinner, as we went around the table sharing what we were grateful for, my father surprised everyone by saying, "I'm grateful that Martha taught us all something important about making assumptions. We underestimated her, and that was our mistake, not hers." The acknowledgement was more meaningful than any apology could have been. It represented a fundamental shift in how my family viewed me and, more importantly, how I viewed myself within the family dynamic. As I reflect on everything that happened over the past year, I realize that buying the house was never really about proving my family wrong. It was about proving myself right. It was about demonstrating to myself that I was capable of setting ambitious goals and achieving them regardless of what other people believed about my potential. The experience taught me that sometimes the best motivation comes from people who don't believe in you. Every dismissive comment, every comparison to my sister, every assumption about my limitations became fuel for my determination to succeed on my own terms. My freelance business has continued to grow, and I'm now making more from consulting than from my day job. I'm seriously considering making the transition to full-time entrepreneurship within the next 6 months. The financial security of homeownership has given me the confidence to take calculated risks with my career that I wouldn't have considered when I was paying rent with no equity to show for it. The personal growth has been just as significant as the professional success. I've learned to trust my own judgment and capabilities instead of seeking validation from family members who had their own biases and limitations. I've developed genuine confidence in my abilities, not the fake it until you make it kind, but the deep, unshakable confidence that comes from proving yourself through action. My relationship with my family has stabilized into something healthier and more authentic. We still have our Sunday dinners, but the dynamics are completely different. My parents ask for my advice on financial planning and business decisions. Diane and I have developed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect rather than competition. Even my extended family members treat me as a successful adult with valuable insights and experiences to share. The house itself has become more than just a place to live. It's a symbol of what's possible when you believe in yourself and work consistently toward your goals. It's a reminder that other people's limitations don't have to become your limitations. It's proof that quiet determination and strategic planning can overcome loud predictions and low expectations. Last month, my neighbor asked me for advice about starting her own small business. She'd seen the success of my consulting work and wanted to know how I'd built such a thriving side hustle into a potential full-time career. As I sat in my home office looking out at the mountain views and thinking about how dramatically my life had changed, I realized that I'd become the kind of person other people come to for advice and inspiration. That realization brought everything full circle. The family member who was once dismissed as someone who would rent forever had become someone who owns her own home, runs her own business, and serves as an example of what's possible when you refuse to accept other people's limitations as your own reality. They said I'd rent forever, but they gave me exactly the motivation I needed to prove that prediction wrong. Sometimes the best gift someone can give you is their doubt, because it forces you to find the strength and determination you never knew you had. So to anyone watching this who's been told they're not capable of achieving their dreams, remember this: other people's opinions about your potential are just that, opinions. What matters is what you believe about yourself and what you're willing to work for. Don't let anyone else's limited vision become your limited reality. Have you ever had a moment where you proved doubters wrong in a big way? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story inspired you or reminded you of your own family dynamics, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming obstacles and achieving goals that others said were impossible. Thank you for watching, and remember that your biggest critics might just become your greatest motivation. Here's to proving them wrong and proving yourself right.